Alright, you guys. I am gonna... Oh, I forgot. I just turned airplane mode on so you can't hear my headphones. Look. We're gonna read Evelyn Underhill. I just wanted you to get the sky before I get it. This guy's sprinting so fast. Okay, so we're gonna get it. Evelyn Underhill. I'll give you the intro while I skate to my car. Don't worry, we'll be right there. It's probably gonna be shorter than the other intros. So, Evelyn Underhill, she wrote this book in 1910. Look at that. Let's see the ocean while we can. She corresponded with C.S. Lewis and told him his idea of God was too tame. That's what she thought. And so Aslan came after that. And Charles Williams and Tolkien were in a group with C.S. Lewis. And Charles Williams was like I forgot what it's called when you get... He took all of Evelyn Underhill's books. Hold on, I gotta get down this hill. And, let go, published some more of her papers and stuff, made sure her works got out there. And then it's amazing because C.S. Lewis and Tolkien did that for Charles Williams after he died. They made essays on fairy stories. It's a free PDF. It's worth reading. Hopefully that didn't make you dizzy. All right. So, I just wanted to get the sun for us. Now, I have a playlist of this book by Evelyn Underhill. It's called Mysticism, Studying the Nature and Development of Spiritual Consciousness. So we've gone through the theology of mysticism and the symbolism, and she talked about how you don't need to get into any occult things. And let's see what else I got. I think I'll go out with you guys as long as I can so you get the sun. But I bought a mic. I don't know what I did with it, but I'll just use the one I had. All right, so we did mysticism and theology, mysticism and symbolism, and she said you don't need to go into the occult. And it's such a temptation because people in our ego nature, we want to have things in our hands, grasp those, you know. And so that's always the occult and stuff like that promises something it can't deliver. Okay. My mic must be in the bag, not in the normal place I keep it. All right, so let's start. You can start here. Oh, I can do this. You can start here, or you can go to my playlist. But I always say that. No, I always say that. If I just start where you are, you know, always do that. Because just trust that this came to you at the right moment and it will give you an introduction into this. Now, if you're totally type A and you want to go start at the beginning, then feel free. How did this get on this? This is so strange. I tried so hard to get this wind thing on and I couldn't get it. And then somehow my mic was it was shoved on in the bag somehow. This is really weird. Anyway. Okay, so let's begin. I remember, I think we left off in a really amazing place. Just a second, I'm untangling this. All right. I don't want to have to redo this because you guys can't hear me well. Okay. I'll see where we are. So if you need to take a screenshot of the beginning. Oh, mysticism and magic. I was going to say we left off in a really important place. because she's talking about how even when you go to church, you know, like high church, the ceremonies are a form of magic, you know, but people don't want to call it that, and they reduce magic to someone pulling a rabbit out of a hat or something, you know. Let me grab my flashlight because it's going to get dark soon. Okay. All right, hopefully. I always think this is just gonna, you know, be quick, but oh well. There it is. My flashlight was in the right place. Oh, and there's my battery pack. Oh, I hope I didn't. Okay, I didn't. Okay, wait. I gotta make sure that that didn't flip, because if I have to edit these, then it's less likely that it's gonna come out. All right, mysticism and magic. Let me start something so that you have something to think about. Oh, I'll show you the beginning again. Look. You can take a screenshot. Oh, no. Hold on. The bookmark just fell out. I hope that's where we were. A screenshot of this. This is a summary of what's going to be in this chapter. Let me hold it steady. So this is free copyright because it was written in 1910, like I said. All right. The starting point of all magic and of all magical religion, the best and purest of occult activities, is, as in mysticism, man's inextinguishable conviction that there are other planes of being than those which his senses report to him. And its proceedings represent the intellectual and individualistic results of this conviction. His craving for the hidden knowledge, it is, in the eyes of those who practice it, a moyen de parvenir, not the performance of illicit tricks, but a serious and philosophic attempt to solve the riddle of the world. Its result, according to one of the best modern writers upon occult philosophy, comprises an actual positive and realizable knowledge concerning the worlds which we denominate invisible, because they transcend the imperfect and rudimentary faculties of a partially developed humanity, and concerning the latent potentialities which constitute, by the fact of their latency, the interior man. In more strict philosophical language, the Hermetic science is a method of transcending the phenomenal world and attaining to the reality which is behind phenomenon. Okay, so I'll just talk about that for a second. I've been a psychologist for 20 years. There was a whole chapter on mysticism and psychology. We just have a few more minutes while the sun is out. I don't know how much you'll be able to see of it, but I'll just go because I can. And then, and so, let's see, what she was just talking about is, I'll just show you the view for a second. Part of this is about being present in this moment. That's what I think. I never know all of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I can go behind this wall. Hopefully you guys can hear the ocean. the sun's gone. This is just the afterglow. There's a song by Ed Sheeran called Afterglow that came out like a year or so ago. It's really pretty. Okay. In more strictly philosophical language, the Hermetic science is a method of transcending. Oh, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking of like infrared, now that they have glasses and stuff and ways to see all of the ultraviolet rays and stuff. It's like you can't see those with your normal eyes. But when you have the glasses on, you see that they're there. It's like that. That will help you understand what this is like. It's like we are souls, we are spirit. And so we long to understand the nature of spirit. And words are so limited, even Hebrew words. I love Hebrew and words that you read from this way to that way, because your left brain, they say, I won't go into all the details of this, but is logical. And so your right eye is controlled by your logical brain, and the right side of your brain is more artistic, and so it controls the left side of your body. Now when you read, we read like this in English, when you read from this way, you're reading more poetically, you're reading more from your creative mind, because it's activating this side of your mind. And each of the letters in Hebrew are like a picture, like cuneiform or Chinese, And so if I could only read Hebrew better, it activates, But once you're not in the mystical realm, where you're just in an expansive mindset, you could just reduce it. It's like, oh, that's the word for cat, and that's all you think of. You don't see the pictures anymore in the letters, So a lot of people that even know how to read Hebrew might not see this stuff anyway. Okay. Though certain parts of this enormous claim seem able to justify themselves in experience, the whole of it cannot be admitted. The last phrase in particular is identical with the promise which we have seen to be characteristic of mysticism. It presents magic as a pathway to reality. We may as well say at once that this promise is not fulfilled, for the apparent transcending of phenomena does not necessarily entail the attainment of the absolute. So just because like someone takes, some kind of, mind-altering substance, I'll just use certain words, just because they transcend the normal phenomena of life doesn't mean that that they're getting this union with divine. She calls it the absolute. She calls God different names. I call God divine love, so that we don't limit it. Because again, it's just like you said, oh, that's a cat, and then you don't see the essence of the cat. Or that's a tree, you don't see the essence of a tree. If you sit and watch a tree for a long time and stop calling it by its label, it's so amazing what can happen, right? And so the same with God. We just have an idea of God, and we don't realize we're limiting God in this little box, It's like what C.S. Lewis says when Lucy's like, Aslan, you're bigger, And he's like, yeah, every time you get bigger, I get bigger, It's like our idea of God grows. Anyway. So it presents magic as a pathway to reality. We may as well say at once that this promise is not fulfilled, for the apparent transcending of phenomena does not necessarily entail the attainment of the absolute. That's what the mystics want. They want union with God, Such an attainment must, as its first condition, meet and satisfy upon the plane of reality each activity of the self. Quote, in here, it's not a quote, but she says love, will, and thought. So she talks about these three aspects a lot. Love, will, and thought, It's like the first commandment. Jesus says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That includes your love, your will, and your thought. Okay, so she goes on. Magic, at its best, only satisfies two of these claimants. and this by extending rather than escaping the boundaries of the phenomenal world. At its worst, it satisfies none. It stands for that form of transcendentalism which does abnormal things, but does not lead anywhere, and we are likely to fall victims to some kind of magic the moment that the declaration, oh, we read this is good though, I want to know, ousts the declaration I want to be. And so when you're, when Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God, when you're, I want to know, that's indicating egotism. Egotism always wants to know, always thinks there's a problem, is always in lack, always wants to be solving a problem. And if you use it like a tool, and instead of it directing your life, first things first, then it's okay. But if your declaration, I want to know, ousts the declaration, I want to be, like, I want to be one with divine love, with God. I want to be one with Christ. I want to be liberated. I want to be in union. I want to be free of my, the world of flesh and the devil, let's say. If you look at, anyway, let's go back. I want to be, so the moment the declaration, and we are likely to fall victims to some kind of magic the moment that the declaration, I want to know, ousts the declaration, I want to be, from the chief place in our consciousness. The true science of ultimates must be a science of pure being, for reasons which the reader is now in a position to discover for himself or herself. But magic is merely a system whereby the self tries to assuage its transcendental curiosity by an extension of the activities of the will beyond their usual limits, obtaining by this means experimental knowledge of planes of existence, usually but inaccurately regarded as supernatural. And so she's saying that's inaccurate to think that these are supernatural. Because they're actually still part of the natural phenomenon. It's just they're not in your normal everyday experience of the natural phenomenon. Like it might be a miracle to us to see Jesus walking on the water, but once you have mystic experiences, you see it as, if he is the maker of all elements, then, it's just like opening a door for him. Like it's a natural phenomenon, but it seems supernatural to us. I can't go into it more right now because some of us are here, some people are here that just want to hear the book, so maybe I'll do augmentary videos sometime, probably not though. It will no doubt be felt by those who are not occultists that even this modified claim needs justification. Few recognize that the whole business of the true magician is not with vulgar marvels, like the fakirs, Fakir in India that like walk on glass and stuff like that. It's not about these vulgar marvels, but with transcendental matters. Fewer still. I'm so glad I came back out to the ocean. Aren't you? You guys take a moment to like this so that other people know it's worth watching, because they'll look at the likes and see that. Even though YouTube doesn't reward you with likes, they reward you with comments. And so if you comment like pretty sunset or whatever you want to comment, so that more people have access to this, because I haven't watched enough videos how to break the algorithm for YouTube. I'm just reading. I'm just doing this. So not break it, but break into, Anyway, all right. So here we go. It says, I appreciate it. Thank you. Few recognize that the whole business of the true magician is not with vulgar marvels, but with transcendental matters. Fewer still that this business may be prosecuted with honesty and success. The search after hidden things has become synonymous with foolish and disreputable deceits, and the small but faithful company of the three great Hermes is confused with the army of camp followers which preys upon its ranks. Most persons who do not specialize in the eccentric sciences are of an opinion that in these days the occultist can only be said to exist in either the commercial or the academic sense. The Bond Street palmist may represent one class, the annotator of improper grimoires the other. In neither department is the thing supposed to be taken seriously. It is merely the means of obtaining money or assuaging a rather morbid curiosity. Such a view is far from being accurate. In magic, whether we choose to regard it as superstition or as science, we have at any rate the survival of a great and ancient tradition, the true splendor and meaning of those of whose title should hardly have been lost in a Christian country. She writes in England, for it claims to be the science of those magi whose quest of the symbolic blazing star brought them once at least, to the cradle of the incarnate God. Hey. Its laws and the ceremonial rites which express those laws have come down to us from immemorial antiquity. They enshrine a certain definite knowledge and a large number of less definite theories concerning the sensual and supersensual worlds, and concerning powers which man, according to occult thinkers, may develop if he will. Orthodox persons should be careful how they condemn the laws of magic, for they unwittingly conform to many of them whenever they go to church. All formal religion is saturated with magic. The art of medicine will never wholly cast it off. Many centuries ago, it gave birth to that which we now call modern science. It seems to possess inextinguishable life. This is not surprising when we perceive how firmly occultism is rooted in psychology, how perfectly it is adapted to certain perennial characteristics of the human mind, its curiosity, its arrogance, its love of mystery. Magic, in its perfect and uncorrupted form, claims to be a practical, intellectual, highly individualistic science, working towards a declared end, that namely of enlarging the sphere on which the will of man can work and obtaining experimental knowledge of planes of being, usually regarded as transcendental. That was kind of like the sentence we started out with. It is the last descendant of a long line of teaching, the whole teaching, in fact, of the mysteries of Egypt and Greece, which aim at initiating man into the secrets of knowledge and aspires egoistically to an understanding of things. In every man, says a living occultist, there are latent faculties by means of which he can acquire for himself knowledge of the higher worlds. As long as the human race has existed, there have always been schools in which those who possess these higher faculties gave instruction to those who were in search of them. Such are called the occult schools, and the instruction which is imparted therein is called esoteric science or the occult teaching. And she said before, you don't need to go into any occult. So I am not recommending that at all whatsoever. But she's just describing what they're looking for. It's kind of like if we talked about what people are looking for when they go to McDonald's. You know what I mean? We're just describing, they just want fast food. You know what I mean? And the nature of fast food. We're not by any means saying it's a good idea to go to that place. I won't say. Anyway, these schools, at least as they can exist in the present day, formulate the laws which govern occult phenomena in a manner which seems distressingly prosaic to the romantic inquirer, borrowing from physics and psychology theories of vibration, attraction, mental suggestion, and subconscious activity, which can be reapplied for their own purposes. According to its modern teachers, magic is in essence simply an extension of the theory and practice of volition beyond the usual limits. The will, says the occultist, is king. Not only... I was just listening to that song. Last night. I can hear your heart beat faster. Take me home tonight. I don't wanna let you go till we see the light. I made a whole hour-and-a-half video on that song, but I didn't get permission yet. They denied my permission so far. Just like Ronnie said, because to me, I saw a whole mystic union in that song. That's what I do on the side here. It's my passion. Take me home tonight. Home is union with divine love, with God. And you want to go home. And it's like the male and the female coming together is a form of union. And so it's like, I don't want to let you go till we see the light. The sun was right over there before, and it's just like, it's a whole song about union if you want to go look it up. If you don't look at it, like, it's like the last chapter we talked about. They talked about how, nuns and monks and everything, they had a pure mind. They weren't talking about filth, but other people like just projected onto them their own misuse of sexuality and stuff like that. But they were talking about divine union, which that's a picture of if Adam and Eve were one together and God took Eve out of Adam's side, half of Adam, that's what this ancient Torah said that I read. Then the union is just like our union with God, and that's going back home. We come from the oneness. I have a cross on, there's a Celtic cross, and there's a circle around it, and so we come from the oneness, and then we come down here. Hello. Anyway, I'm glad I didn't get spooked by the dog. Okay, that's crazy that song was playing. I was literally, it's been raining, so I was at a roller rink last night, and I didn't like the music, so I was listening to that song and remembering how I made that whole video about it. I recorded a video last night. I'm not sure if I was listening to a different song, I think, anyway. I only mention it because it's exactly what we're talking about, and things like that just happen. That stuff does not happen by accident. You can think it does, but we are in a matrix. And would you yield yourself to do things like this on a Friday night instead of going out or whatever I could be doing, Then things like that happen. Beautiful, tender things that give to all of us. So just be aware. Quiet your heart so you can be aware that these things are happening for us. They are. People can discount it, but it's not to be discounted. But that's up to you. I can't make you. All right, so the will, says the occultist, is king, not only of the house of life, there you go, but of the universe outside the gates of sense. It is the key to, quote, man limitless, the true ring of Gyges, which can control the forces of nature, known and unknown. This aspect of occult philosophy informs much of the cheap American transcendentalism, which is so lightly miscalled mystical by its teachers and converts. Mentaculture, new or higher thought, and the scriptures of the so-called new consciousness, the ingenious authors of Volo, The Will to Be Well, and Just How to Wake the Solar Plexus, the seers who assure their eager disciples that by concentration they may acquire not only health, but also that wealth, which is, quote, health of circumstance, are no mystics. These are not true mystics, okay? They'll call themselves that, but she's saying they're not. They are magicians and teach, though they know it not, little else but the cardinal doctrines of the Hermetic science, omitting only their picturesque ceremonial accompaniments. Okay, now we're past where we were before. I may go to the car. Look at that island. I can't zoom in on this side. Let me see if I can turn the light up. Till we see the light. Anyway. These cardinal doctrines, in fact, have varied little since their first appearance early in the world's history, though, like the doctrines of theology, they have needed restatement from time to time. Like the doctrines of theology. I was watching a video yesterday called How Are We Saved? And John Butler's talking about it, or something about the means of salvation. And it's like, he just contemplated for an hour. Oh, someone's getting high. Okay, anyway, sorry, I say that sometimes I'm so open when I'm reading this that I'm just like, no filter, I'll just say whatever's going on. because I am open to what's coming, but it's important I still have a filter. But I want to get back to my car anyway. I had that notion a little bit ago, right? So I'll talk to you about the video just for a second, because it'll help us understand what she's saying right now. Okay, so how far are these people? I gotta be careful skating in the dark. All right, but I cleared this earlier when I was skating. I cleared off everything. So oh, see, that distracted. For the modern reader. Oh, okay, I remember now. I had to look for a second. So what I'm saying is, like, you can just, you can read. Oh, it's so awesome. Okay, so it's like this. This is a perfect example. The other day, someone had a Bob Marley reel, right? And Bob Marley converted to Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity before he died. So he left Rastafari, but they don't like promoting that. As far as I understand, this is what happened. He was baptized in it and everything. So, I'm sure there's a record of his baptism somewhere, but they don't like saying that because, he was such a spokesperson for Rastafari. They want you, they want you to follow that. But so I love Bob Marley. One of my kids was born on his birthday. So anyway, they there was this video, and it's just like a 30-second video, right? I'm taking a lot longer to describe it. And they asked him, what do I do to become enlightened? And he says, you must be born again, right? And the reporter said exactly what Nicodemus said. When Nicodemus asked Jesus, what must he do? And he said, Nicodemus said, oh, do I have to go back in my mother's stomach? How is that to be? You know what I mean? And Jesus is like, no, you were born of the flesh, you're born of water, there's water in your mom's stomach, and you have to be born of the spirit, right? But Bob Marley said, no, you have to be born again. And the guy was like, do I have to be born black or something like that? And it was so awesome because Bob Marley's like, if you have a choice, come black. If you don't, come as God has you, as God makes you, It's so awesome. But I was just, and so what I'm saying about this is that, I'll turn the light on, is, you can say, oh, all I have to do for salvation is be born again, put my faith in Jesus and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, what does that mean? And people can describe what it means. But I love how Rumi talks about, he says that like, all of these are pointers. They're pointers to how and everything. They're pointers to this. But it's not about just getting an idea in your head. It's actually like, you can describe a baby being born, but until a baby is actually born, that's what I was contemplating today. You can describe, if I described to my kids when they're like 4, they're like, Mom, where do babies come from? And I'm like, well, they're made in a woman's stomach. It's like they can only understand so much in that moment. But if you went through, like we had a baby book that was like this big, a pregnancy book that it talked about each stage, what's being developed, what's growing in the baby. I could take 4 hours and describe to my kid actually what phenomena is happening, but some phenomena is happening. And so I was maybe it was brought to my attention so that I'd have it for our video today, because you can see I was just skating. I didn't know I'd be doing this video today. I do remember I wanted to read this chapter on magic, and I wanted to get back to it quickly, but things have come up. But anyway, so you can just say, oh, this is salvation, or this means I'm saved. And it's not. It's not just an idea. It's not just like, oh, I said I was saved and therefore I'm saved, you know. I say I'm born again. No, that you actually have to be born again. And people, I grew up in the church, but I didn't, you know, I didn't hear this quote very often, right? Where it says, John the Baptist says, one will come after me that's greater than me, and he will baptize you with the Spirit and with fire. Like, I didn't hear the fire part, but I've been experiencing the fire part, because that's what ego death is about. That's what the dark night of the soul is about. There's a fire that happens that burns up, you know, when you yield to it, it burns up the stuff that is not meant to be there, that and it's painful. It's as painful as you resist it. It's pretty painful regardless, because we've been programmed to resist that. We've been programmed to hold so tightly to our flesh. I'm going to lock this even though it's a very safe neighborhood. I just like feeling like all enclosed. Hermetically sealed, right? Aww. I was friends with this musician, Elliott Smith, and he had a song that was so like this, and it was capturing all these elements, but he's like, an airless cell that blocks the day. Oh, well, okay. It's a really sad and beautiful song. He sang it to me one time backstage before it was released, and I was the only one backstage with him. He was warming up for a show in LA at a place called Largo. Anyway, he's passed on now, so okay. Let's be really deeply present with this, because these aren't just words that I'm saying. It's a gift. We've been given a gift. We've been given a gift to have this video, to have this book, to have Evelyn Underhill take the time to write this for us, to study it. And then, anyway, I'll go on. These cardinal doctrines, in fact, have varied little since their first appearance early in the world's history, though. Like the doctrines of theology, they have needed restatement from time to time. In setting them out for the enlightenment of the modern reader, I shall quote largely from the works of Eliphas, Eliphas, Levi, the pseudonym under which Alphonse Louis Constant, probably the sanest and certainly the most readable occult philosopher of the 19th century, offered his conclusions to the world. Eliphas Levi found in the old magical tradition, rehandled in the terms of contemporary thought, an adequate theory of the universe and rule of practical life. Now just use your own discernment. I trust what she's writing, but I have to use my own discernment as well, and I haven't read ahead, but I know in the 7th edition that I haven't read, but I don't want to read it in case it's copyright, that she did an update of this 30 years later, after 30 years of meditating every day, and being steeped in Anglicanism and going to Mass all that time and reading Matilda Magdeburg and all of these people, even more than when she first wrote this. I just trust that God knew the direction her soul would be heading in, but always use discernment. So maybe she corrects and takes some of this out in the newer update. I'm not sure. Okay, in his writings, therefore, we see the Hermetic science under its most favorable aspect, opus hierarchium et catholicum, as he proudly calls it upon the title page of his great History de la Magie. I don't know what language all these are, so she can speak like 5 different languages. I took Greek and Hebrew and Spanish, and I lived in Montreal for a year, so I know French some, but I don't know Latin. And anyway, it is the one object of his later works to exhibit, indeed to exaggerate, its connection with true mysticism, to show that it is la clef des grands mystères, sorry about my pronunciation, but which will open the gate of the secret garden on which the desire of the soul is ever set. The spectacle which he presents is that of a man of eager desires and natural intuitions set, is true, upon the quest of reality. I think that's a mistype. It is true. I don't know. Upon the quest of reality, but pursuing that quest by strange and twisted paths. It remains for us to examine with his help the nature of these paths and the prospects which they offer to other wayfarers. The tradition of magic, like most other ways of escape which man has offered to his own soul, originated in the East. It was formulated, developed, and preserved by the religion of Egypt. It made an early appearance in that of Greece. It has its legendary grandmaster in Hermes Trismegistus, who gave to it its official name of Hermetic science, and stands towards the magicians in much the same position as Moses occupied in their tradition of the Jews. Moses was a magician. I mean, God did it through him. It's God's power. But he trained in the Egyptian, he was brought up as a pharaoh's child, you know. He was trained in all of those sciences. Anyway, I won't go into that. Fragmentary writings attributed to this personage and contained in the so-called Hermetic books are the primitive scriptures of occultism and the probably spurious table of emerald, which is said to have been discovered in his tomb, ranks as a magician's table of stone. In Gnosticism, in the superb allegories of the Kabbalah, in much of the ceremonial of the Christian Church, finally in secret associations which still exist in England, France, and Germany, all that is best and truest in the, quote, secret wisdom of magical tradition has wandered down the centuries. Its baser offshoots, by which it is unfortunately represented to the crowd, are but too well known and need not be particularized. Like the world which it professes to interpret, magic has a body and a soul, an outward vesture of words and ceremonies, and an inner doctrine. The outward vesture, which is all that the uninitiated are permitted to perceive, is hardly attractive to the judicious eye of common sense. It consists of a series of confusing and often ridiculous symbolic veils, of strange words and numbers, grotesque laws and ritual acts, personifications and mystifications, wrapped one about the other as if the bewilderment of impatient investigators were its one design. The outward vestures of our religious, political, and social systems, which would probably appear equally irrational to a wholly ignorant yet critical observer, offer an instructive parallel to this aspect of occult philosophy. Stripped of these archaic formulas, symbols, mystery mongerings, and the other adventitious trappings, magic is found to rest upon 3 fundamental axioms, none of which can be dismissed as ridiculous by those who listen respectfully to the amazing and ever-shifting hypotheses of fashionable psychology and physics. 1. The first of these axioms affirms the existence of an imponderable medium or universal agent, which is described as beyond the plane of our normal sensual perceptions, yet interpenetrating and binding upon the material world. This agent, which is not luminous and has nothing to do with the stars, is known to the occultist by the unfortunate name of astral light, a term originally borrowed from the Martionists by Eliphas Levi, to which the religious rummage sales of current theosophy have since given to familiarity which treads upon the margin of contempt. I'm just saying a prayer. It's like the Lord is our shepherd. Direct us, lead us, help us understand what you want us to know, God, in Jesus' name. To live in conscious communication with the, quote, astral light is to live upon the astral plane or in the astral world. This is egotism. The astral plane is it's still egotism. It's not your soul. But anyway, to live in conscious communication with the quote astral light is to live upon the quote astral plane or in the astral world, to have risen, that is to say, to a new level of consciousness. The education of the occultist is wholly directed towards this end. This is why it's dangerous, because it feels like it's spiritual, but you're dabbling in it's a kind of spiritual egotism. And it's just like if you follow things for your egotism here on earth, if you ran after worldly gain, it's like the love of money is the root of all evil. It's still feeding your egotism. It's not the love of money. It's the love of mammon, which is materiality, which people think this is the immaterial spiritual plane, but it's still a form of mammon, materiality, and that's the root of all evil. And so it's not bad that we have these desires to know spiritual things. We're spiritual beings, and so we ought to know. And like, honestly, you could sit for 4 hours and contemplate one verse in the Psalms that David wrote, or one verse of Jesus's words, and get so much more than any occult thing you could ever go to that teaches you about the astral plane and all this stuff. But it's not as delicious, delectable to our egotism, our spiritual egotism. So just, anyway, I'll keep going. I just know this from my own experience. The education of the occultist is wholly directed towards this end. The doctrine of the astral plane, like most of our other diagrams of the transcendent, possesses not only a respectable ancestry, but also many prosperous relations in the world of philosophic thought. Traces of it may even be detected under veils in the more recent speculations of orthodox physics. It is really identical with the, quote, archetypal world, or Yesod, of the Kabbalah, the, quote, perfect land of old Egyptian religion, in which exist the true or spirit forms of all created things. Now, Plato talks about this as well, that the spiritual is the real, that these planes are real, and we're in a shadowlands, like the movie about C.S. Lewis was called The Shadowlands. Anyway, perhaps it is connected with the real world, quote, real world, described by such visionaries as Boehm and Blake. A persistent tradition as to the existence of such a plane of being or of consciousness is found all over the world in Indian, Greek, Egyptian, Celtic, and Jewish thought. Quote, above this visible nature there exists another, unseen and eternal. Okay, I was gonna I totally know this quote, right? Okay, anyway, quote, above this visible nature there exists another, unseen and eternal, which, when all things created perish, does not perish, says the Bhagavad Gita. That's why I know that. According to the Kabbalists, it is, quote, the seat of life and vitality, and the nourishment of all of the world. If you want to understand this biblically, when you pray, give us this day our daily bread, you're saying, give us the super substantial, that which is beyond the substantial, the substantial, the normal substance. It's like every breath and heartbeat comes from God. Every heartbeat belongs to you. Oh, that's an Amy Grant song. Baby, baby. I get songs a lot. That's how spiritual ideas are conveyed to me. But anyway, so every breath that you have comes from the divine love. It's a gift. C.S. Lewis said, every act of free will is like a miracle in a way. But anyway, so they're talking about the seat of life and vitality and the nourishment of all the world. if you think of also in the Lord's Prayer, give us our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Holy is your name. I was contemplating this today. God's name, you don't pick up a rock and it says made by God, made in China, but his essence, his name, his, her, God is beyond his or her name is in everyone and everything, It's the God vitality. We're made out of the spark of God. Anyway, I'll keep reading. Hopefully you understand some of what I'm talking about. And you probably lots of you have so much more knowledge than I have. So I'm not trying to act like I'm super knowledgeable in this stuff. It just, I didn't realize I was. Like, I didn't realize how much has come to me from just studying and wanting to know and wanting to be free and not in pain. Anyway, vitalism might accept it as one of those aspects of the universe which can be perceived by a more extended rhythm than that of normal consciousness. Various aspects of it have been identified with the, quote, burning body of the Holy Ghost of Christian Gnosticism and with the odic force of the old-fashioned spiritualists. According to the doctrine of magic, the astral plane constitutes the, quote, cosmic memory. Maybe she's talking about the Akashic records. I know Joseph Campbell talks about the collective consciousness, and so does Carl Jung. There's a collective consciousness, of like the masculine and the feminine and all sorts of, and Akashic records is a place where there's the record of everything that was ever said or done, or any blade of grass or anything. Anyway, I won't get into that. So she's talking about, according to the doctrine of magic, the astral plane constitutes the, quote, cosmic memory, where the images of all beings and events are preserved. There they go. I'm going to let her talk. As they are preserved in the memory of man. Quote, the high that proved too high, the heroic for earth too hard, the passion that left the ground to lose itself in the sky. That's from A.E. Waite, Doctrine and Literature of the Kabbalah, page 48. Anyway, all are living in the astral world. There too, the concepts of future creation are present in their completeness in the eternal now, before being brought to birth in the material sphere. Oh, there's something about this making me nauseous, because that just came on out of nowhere. On this theory, prophecy and also clairvoyance, one of the great objects of occult education, consists in opening the eyes of the mind upon the timeless astral world, and spiritualists evoking the phantoms of the dead merely call them up from the recesses of universal instead of individual remembrance. I was just reading in Proverbs 8, I think, or maybe 4, it says, the way of the wicked, the way of, it's called a strange woman, goes to the dead, to the land of the dead. And it's like, it's still written, okay? So I have a feeling that we can study this in this way, in a safe way. You follow your own discernment. And we see, it's still recorded in the Bible how Saul, the King Saul, before David, had forbidden going to occultists and mediums, and yet they still show what happened when he went to a medium of Endor, right, and called up Samuel, the prophet, who had been dead. And, she says, I see Samuel and you are Saul. And she has spiritual gifts. Just because she has spiritual gifts does not mean she ought to be using them in that way. And so they're still recorded and you're looking at them. But I just encourage you to be careful because, I've seen videos. I saw one last night about this guy that was in the New Age and then left and became a Christian. But he described all of these things that I wish I hadn't listened to because they triggered a lot of stuff. And even that can open doors. So I err on the cautious side anyway, as much as I can. But we are meant to be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. Just keep that. That's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. And the devil presents himself as the angel of light, as, oh, I'm just doing this, just don't dabble. That's my recommendation, just from getting very burned. Okay. On this theory, prophecy and also clairvoyance, one of the great objects of occult education, consists in opening the eyes of the mind upon the timeless astral world, and spiritualists evoking the phantoms of the dead merely call them up from the recesses of universal instead of individual remembrance. The reader who feels his brain to be whirling amidst this medley of solemn statement and unproven fairy tale must remember that at best the dogmatic part of the occult tradition can only represent the attempt of an extended consciousness to find an explanation of its own experiences. And remember, because I was asking God about this the other day, like Moses and Elijah showed up with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, but he told the disciples that were with them, Peter and John, and one more, I think Peter's brother, but he said not to say it until after he rose from the dead, what had happened. And Peter recognized, do you want me to make a booth? Because it was the Feast of Booths for Moses and Elijah. He recognized, you get a knowing. But it doesn't mean Jesus called up the dead, And yet there was a place where those who were not in that time period, Moses and Elijah, showed up on that mountain. And Jesus was having a conversation with them. But never are we meant to call up the dead, as far as I understand at all. So anyway, further, in its strictly undenominational form, the astral light is first cousin to the intangible ether beloved of Sir Oliver Lodge and other transcendental physicists. In our whole selves, not merely our sentient selves, are bathed, and here again we are reminded of vitalism, with its unresting river of life. Hence, in occult language, the all-penetrating astral is a universal agent, quote, universal agent, the possible vehicle of hypnotism, telepathy, clairvoyance, and all those supernormal phenomena which science has taken out of the hands of the occultist and renamed metapsychic. They did in the 1910s when she was writing this. This hypothesis also accounts for the confusing fact of an initial similarity of experience in many of the proceedings of mystic and occultist. Both must pass through the plane of consciousness with the concept of the, quote, astral end quote, represents, because this plane of perception is the one which lies, quote, next beyond our normal life. The transcendental faculties, once they are freed, become aware of this world, only in the case of the mystic to pass through it as quickly as they can. The occultist, on the contrary, is willing to rest in the astral and develop his perceptions of this aspect of the world. It is the medium in which he works. From the earliest times, occult philosophy has proclaimed its knowledge of this medium, always describing its existence as a scientific fact, outside the range of our normal senses, but susceptible of verification by the trained powers of the initiate. The possessor of such trained powers, not the wizard or the fortune teller, is to be regarded as the true magician, and it is the first object of occult education or initiation to actualize this supersensual plane of experience, to give the student the power of entering into conscious communion with it, and teach him to impose upon its forces the directive force of his own will, as easily as he imposes that will upon the material things of the sense. 2. This brings us to the second axiom of magic, which also has a curious modern air, for it postulates simply the limitless power of the disciplined human will. This dogma has been, quote, taken over, without acknowledgement, from occult philosophy to become the trump card of mentaculture, quote, Christian Science, and, quote, New Thought. The preachers of, quote, joy philosophy and other dilute forms of mental discipline are the true priests of transcendental magic in the modern world. The first lesson, we got to wrap up, of the would-be magus is self-mastery. By means of Here's a quote. By means of persevering and gradual athletics, as says Eliphas Levi, quote, the power of the body can be developed to an amazing extent. It is the same with the powers of the soul. And I don't even know if it's actually your soul. It could be your astral body or something, which is different than the soul. Would you govern yourself and others? Learn how to will. How may one learn how to will? This is the first secret of magical initiation, and it was to make the foundations of this secret thoroughly understood that the antique keepers of the mysteries surrounded the approach to the sanctuary with so many terrors and illusions. They did not believe in a will until it had given its proofs, and they were right. Strength cannot prove itself except by conquest. Idleness and negligence are the enemies of the will, and this is the reason why all religions have multiplied their practices and made their cults difficult and minute. The more trouble one gives oneself for an idea, the more power one acquires in regard to that idea. Hence, the power of religions resides entirely in the inflexible will of those who practice them. That's the end of that quote. In its essence, then, magical initiation is a traditional form of mental discipline, strengthening and focusing the will. By it, some of those powers of apprehension which lie below the threshold of ordinary consciousness are liberated and enabled to report their discoveries to the active and sentient mind. This discipline, like that of religious life, consists partly in physical austerities and in a deliberate divorce from the world, partly in the cultivation of willpower, but largely in a yielding of the mind to the influence of suggestions which have been selected and accumulated in the course of ages, because of their power over the imagination, which Eliphas Levi calls, quote, the eye of the soul, end quote. There is nothing supernatural about it. Like the more arduous and more disinterested self-training of the mystic, it is character building with an object conducted upon an heroic scale. In magic, quote, the will to know is the center round which the personality is rearranged. As in mysticism, subconscious factors are dragged from the hiddenness to form part of that personality. The uprushes of thought, the abrupt intuitions which reach us from the subliminal region are developed, ordered, and controlled by rhythms and symbols which have become traditional because the experience of the centuries has proved, though it cannot explain, their efficacy. Quote, the fundamental principle, says A.E. Waite, speaking of occult evocations, was in the exercise of a certain occult force resident in the magus and strenuously exerted for the establishment of such a correspondence between two planes of nature as would effect his desired end. This exertion was termed in the evocation, conjuration, or calling of the spirit, but, quote, that which in reality was raised was the energy of the inner man, tremendously developed and exalted by combined will and aspiration. This energy germinated by sheer force a new intellectual faculty of sensible psychological perception. To assist and simulate this energy into the most powerful possible operation, artificial means were almost invariably used. Ellipsis. The synthesis of these methods and process were called ceremonial magic, which in effect was a tremendous force forcing house of the latent faculties of man's spiritual nature. This is the psychological explanation of those apparently absurd rituals of preparation, doctrines of signs and numbers, pentacles, charms, and angelical names, and the power of the word, and all the rest which go to make up ceremonial magic. Okay, so she's not saying to do any of this stuff. I wish you love. I gotta wrap this up. Thank you for being here. We'll continue. I as much as it is in my power to continue, we need to finish this chapter so that you can, not get lost in the occult stuff at all, because I don't want you lost in that, I wish you so much love. All right, share this with like-minded people, I guess. I don't know if you know who is like-minded with this. I wish you so much love. All right, bye.